And we are now streaming. Will you let me know when you want to open the doors?
Let's go. Hello and welcome everyone to our webinar of today, the 20th of October. This is Neuroscience Made Simple. Our topic today is social learning. Welcome. I'd love to hear a hello and welcome from you guys as you're coming in.
Hello.
Hi, Roger. How are you?
Very well indeed. Thank you, Laurie.
Good to see you again.
Hello.
Hi, Colleen. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you. Nice to see you again, Laurie. It's been a long, long time.
It has been. How are things?
Wow, they're very good. Thank you.
Good. Glad to hear it. Good.
You know, you are my first leader at CTI.
Is that right?
For the fundamentals, yes.
And I have no idea which city that was in, or even
San Francisco.
San Francisco.
Well, Marin County, really, that was way back when.
Way back when, that must have been ages ago. It's been so long.
2001, exactly.
Yeah, wow. So you've been coaching a long time.
Yes, and still loving it as much today as I did back then.
Excellent, excellent. Good. Right, well, it looks like it's 4 o'clock UK time.
Oh, why is this not showing? Oh,
Hi, Arona. Sounds like you're here.
yes, I am.
Great,
Okay.
welcome. So, folks, hi, Koksal, how are you? I see a hi in the chat box. Good to have you again. And welcome to everyone. If you have any technical issues, just put something in the chat box and Photo will be over there to handle it. And and I'd love it if you just put in a note. We have a few more people coming, I think, but it'd be great to have just a hello from where you're calling from in the chat, just to see a little mix of people from different places. And we are focusing on social learning today. I'm curious what you think that means. Some thoughts. Love to just hear. We've got a small enough group that we can have more shares. So we'd love to have some just verbal thoughts. Where does that take you when you see the title social learning?
I'm guessing it's something to do with the way our learning is enhanced when we are learning collectively rather than just in an isolated manner.
Yes, excellent. That's a great.
Oh, that was a lucky guess.
Any other guesses and lucky guesses out there, and thoughts and questions even? Well, let's go.
More fun, isn't it, when there's other people? When you're learning with other people, it was a little more engaging and motivational. So I guess that must help.
It does. It does. That's why we're going to be putting you in learning groups soon. But let's have a couple of slides and some bits of conversation and see where we get to. So our a definition we're working with for learning, it's not necessarily social learning, but for learning, is that learning is about acquiring new behavior. Now, if you were on the webinar a month ago or 3 weeks, our previous one, we talked a lot about learning and how to create learning and how the brain learns and the different aspects of memory and different parts of memory in the brain. And we're building on that. So our working definition of learning is about acquiring a new behavior, not just learning concepts, but learning concepts is part of learning new behavior, because you need to learn, why am I doing this? That might be a cognitive, set of cognitive reasons. It might also be steps of something you need to understand how to do if you're going to be having a new behavior, going to learn a new behavior. So, sorry, I'm just noticing we have people in our waiting room. Welcome, those of you who are just joining us. We're just talking about learning and social learning. So, what we're going to be what we're going to be working with today is social learning. How do we learn together? How does that enhance our learning when we're learning together? And we will be having an interactive experience of social learning. So you'll be in a breakout room where you'll be talking about a topic, and the topics we're choosing are favorite topics for us, but you can choose your own if you want. So I'll say more about that right before we send you off to that. And we'll look at, why does social interaction help us learn? And also how to create the conditions so that you can have great social learning. Now, this is assuming that you have the opportunity to work with groups of people, if you're a trainer or you're a team coach, or working with multiple people. There's also adaptations for one-to-one coaching. So if you are coaching individuals, we can have an adaptation for that. Since there's just you and the other person, there is some social interaction there. But mostly I'll be referring to having groups of people and having them learn together. I'll also be talking about Rewired to Lead, which is our leadership program. It's a 10-month program, and we rely heavily on social learning. Just letting in some more people from our waiting room. Hello, everyone. Sorry to keep you waiting in our waiting room. Just bringing more people in. I was just talking to everyone about what to expect on this webinar. We'll be doing having an experience of social learning, and then talking about what happened in that social learning. And then, it's a social interaction. It's a conversation. It doesn't have to be interacting together and demonstrating something, but it's the conversation that happens together where learning really happens for us individually and also in a collective sense. And I want to give you a couple of stories about how I have experienced this myself. And one big experience is a program that I run. It's called Alchemy. It doesn't matter. It's about co-facilitation. And in that program, we have people work in pairs. So 2 people work together throughout the whole, it's a weekend program, a 3-day program. And people talk about what great experiences they have. And I finally realized that so much of their great experience is the fact that they're learning with a partner throughout the whole program. It's not just that they're learning how to co-lead with that partner. It's that these two people, and I've seen it hundreds of times, they're learning together, they're getting to know each other, they build a certain intimacy and closeness. And within that intimacy and closeness, there's more learning. It's like the brain is happier, it's absorbing more, it's more curious. There's a safety, there's comfort, there's oxytocin and dopamine, which are chemicals that have us be open and trust, and they have us be curious and enjoy ourselves. And we learn more when we're enjoying. So I suppose the opposite is also true, because there are times when people are frustrated and upset with others in a learning situation, and they don't learn as much. There's conflict, and that closes the brain down. So we talk about social learning, but there's some care to be had about how do you create that social situation and make sure that it's one that's safe and fun, if possible, so that it can be productive, so there can be some intimacy and closeness between the people who are learning together. Would love it if there's any thoughts about that from anybody, or questions or concerns or big curiosities, verbally or in the chats.
Yeah, Laurie, are you talking about collective intelligence, or is that a little bit different?
That is a great question. Because when I think of collective intelligence, I think of what's already there. I could be defining collective intelligence incorrectly. So Colleen, maybe you have a different definition to it. Collective intelligence to me says we all come together and share what we already know, and then we all know more because we're all more tapped into that collective intelligence. I think that's part of social learning, but also and that's probably what you'll experience today, in fact. But there's also when we are with other people and we experience new thoughts together. There's something powerful in that, where we're on a journey together. And for me, that's slightly different than collective intelligence. What do you think, Colleen?
Yeah, I think I like what you said. I can see collective intelligence being part of social learning.
Other people and we
being a subset.
Together. There's something. Shensen, I heard part of what you said. What do you think?
Who's talking?
Shensen, was that you talking? I heard somebody and it looked like Shensen was talking. Or actually, when I think about it, that sounds like an echo of what I said a minute ago. That's interesting. So, social learning. Are you ready to experiment with this? Everybody willing to experiment? I'm trusting that you're willing to experiment. We're going to put you in groups of 3. And there's going to be a conversation that you have together. And Colleen, I think this is going to be possibly more about collective intelligence, but I'm hoping that it's a learning conversation. And so I ask you to pick one topic. This is going to show up in the chat. Frodo's going to put it in the chat box so that you have it when you go to a breakout room. You'll be picking one topic, and we've proposed 2 topics because we like neuroscience. One of them is about how the emotional brain drives most of our choices. And the second is knowing how the brain helps you manage your impact. Now, there'll be about 3 of you in a breakout room. If you choose to focus on something else, please don't spend all your time choosing a topic, but just spend some time together on that topic using the following 2 questions. And I apologize, right before we started, I noticed that I had a mistake in my second question. How have you experienced this? So of the topic you pick, let's say you pick the emotional brain drives most of our choices. How have you experienced this? So you will be sharing collectively, teaching one another, for example, from your lives, from your world, about how the emotional brain drives most of your choices. And you can look at how does this concept influence your work? Those are starting questions. The idea is to generate together some ideas and learn from one another for an experience of social learning. Now, this is an experiment. I haven't tried this before, so I'm trusting that it'll go well. You'll be in a conversation with about 3 people and have that conversation. Any questions about what you're to do in the next 10 minutes as you're together with a group? Great. And put part of your attention on what happens as you speak collectively about the topic. Also notice maybe you're impulses to ask other questions, or, and notice how learning happens or not. And then we'll talk about that together collectively. So we'll have a different layer of social learning. Okay, I'll let you go off to your learning groups of about 3. Please, you'll focus on the chat. The topics are in the chat box. The topics and the questions. And Sherry, it looks like you're still connecting to audio, or there is no audio. And Cooksall, are you here? No, okay. So for those of you who are on YouTube or even watching this recorded, we have about 9 minutes now to create some learning. Cooksall is saying I can't be interactive today. Great, just listening. That's fine. So the topics that we sent people off with are the emotional brain drives most of our choices, and knowing about the brain helps you manage your impact. We would pick one of those. Let's say we pick a topic about knowing about the brain helping you manage your impact. I'm trying to see how I could mimic how a learning conversation might go. Imagine you're in a group and there's different people who have different ideas. We have somebody new coming in. This may be an opportunity. Hi, Serena.
Hi, how are you guys?
Good, how are you?
Doing great. Sorry, I'm trying to get my headset back on.
Okay, so we have people off in a learning group, and they are focusing on a social learning conversation. Would you like to just jump into that conversation? Or would you like to?
Yeah, well, without the background, I'm curious what the focus will be, and my apologies for coming in late. But I'm curious what the prompt is, or if there's any background that might be helpful.
Before you go into a room.
Right.
Yeah, there's, I'm going to, Photo, would you post the question again? So this is social learning. This topic, the webinar, is about social learning, and people are off having an experience of what it is to learn from one another. Social learning is basically learning through discussions with one another, learning from others' experiences, possibly challenges. And I've proposed 2 topics. By the time you get into the room, there'll be about 5 minutes, 3, 4, or 5 minutes into the conversation. So they'll have chosen the topic. They'll introduce you, I'm sure, to what they're talking about. And then there's a couple of questions. How have you experienced this topic? And how does this concept influence your work? There are other questions that'll come up. Okay, you ready?
Sure.
So
yeah.
Freda, will you put Serena in a room to join others? And I'll continue my conversation with those who are watching a recording or over in YouTube land. So imagine that you are in a group and there are different opinions about this topic. As you each share your opinion and you're willing to listen to others, this isn't about having a debate, but about how to hear each other's perspectives. It kind of stretches your own understanding. It might change your understanding of what the topic is. So somebody says, well, I know about my brain, it helps me manage my impact because I know about my emotions and how I can craft them and how I can, be careful with somebody else. And that's what it means to me to know about my brain. And that's what it means to me to manage my impact. Somebody else might say, it doesn't matter about managing my impact. I know about my brain and I know about others. And that's what, creates, the impact is created internally for them. That might be just 2 different perspectives that people share with one another, and they might feel quite different and maybe even in conflict. But if they talk it through, they'll find new understandings. Hi there, GSC Staff Coaching. Welcome. I don't know who that is who just got here. I'm sorry you turned your video off. There's a room. We're in the middle of group discussions. We'd love to put you in a room if you're willing, with a breakout room with others having a discussion. Are you willing to do that?
Sorry, it's probably me. I made a mistake because I logged in on YouTube first, and I realized when you did the breakout rooms that you couldn't do anything with me. So then I went back to my email and found that there was in fact a Zoom link as well. So I'm sorry for all the confusion.
That's okay. Do you want to go into and share, be in a room, a conversation room? Because you heard the beginning, right?
I heard the beginning, but I don't want to disturb the others. So I let you decide what's best for the group.
Yeah, it's fine, I think.
Okay.
You can find a room with a small number of participants.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sure, no problem. It's great that you're here. So as trying to pick up that thread, so as we share with one another, possibly having different opinions and different experiences, we can broaden our understanding and broaden our depth of knowledge about a particular topic. Where if we're only learning on our own, we have just our one brain looking at the topic, our own experiences that we look through, because everything we see is based on our perspective and our view, which is based on our past experience. But if we hear others, then that can broaden our perspective, broaden our view, broaden our understanding. What else can I say about this? So there's the broadening of understanding. There's also, some learning conversations happen because we've gone out and we've had each had an experience, and then we come back and share our experiences, and there's a lot to be learned from our various experiences. And so as we share those, again, we have different views, we have different experiences. Maybe somebody succeeded at doing something and somebody else failed at it. And well, I can learn if I was successful in what I did. I can learn from people who weren't successful, like what happened over there? How did that work or not work? Okay, I want to make sure I don't do that part that doesn't work, or try it in that situation. And the person who wasn't successful with the activity and say, here's what I learned, don't try asking a question of somebody when there's a fire and they need to be told, get out of the building. That's not the time to ask open-ended questions, for example. I often come back to coaching questions as an example of learning. And that, that will be deeply embedded in the person who's failed or not done something well. That will be deeply embedded in them, because we learn so powerfully from failures. It's not a good idea to try and force that all the time, but it is a powerful learning opportunity, right? You did something, you touched the hot stove, you will not do that again, hopefully, because you have this strong memory of stoves are hot, hobs, stoves, stovetops, whatever you want to call them. They're hot. Or in an emergency situation, that's not the time to be asking open-ended questions. We learn these, and so we can share those with others. Let me see, we have about 2 more minutes. So we can share that learning. And if I've experienced something in a shocking way, my shocking experience actually is contagious to others. So somebody else may go, oh, I'll never touch that hot stove. There's in a way we learn by association. I've had this experience, they've had that experience, somebody else had another. And as we share our experiences, it's as if part of us is thinking we've had that experience. So it's as if we've had 4 different experiences, if we have a conversation with 4 people who've had very different experiences. So we're always tracking each other. We've got mirror neurons who are taking on other people's experiences. So somebody else's story becomes our own. And our feelings are contagious. So, we embed powerful experiences powerfully. We help each other broaden our concepts, because conversation, there's another aspect here. Conversation helps us learn. So in the previous webinar that we had, it was about how we learn in our brain and how our language center is right next to our memory. And as those things, as conversation happens, it helps things be embedded, helps experience be embedded in experiential memory and also cognitive memory. And they go together. So as we talk with people, that's another aspect of this. As we talk with people, we're also embedding it in our own minds. We don't even have to have different experiences with others. The other person doesn't even have to have an experience at all, because in fact, this is why coaching works, individual coaching, because as a coachee or a client talks to their coach, they're also learning in this way. That's a way that social learning is helping one-to-one coaching, because somebody's talking about their learning, using language, embedding their learning in their memory areas. So here come our people back. So I'd love to hear from some people. We don't need to know the content of what you were talking about, or even what you concluded, or even what you learned, or any of that. Just curious, if you focus on how did those 10 minutes of conversation help you learn something? Because 10 minutes of conversation is a type of social learning. How did that help you learn? Or what else would you have needed to have a better learning experience? Anybody willing to share? Claire, is that you willing to share?
Yes.
Great.
So what we noticed is we really bounced off each other. So
Okay.
one thought led to another thought, led to another thought, which was really nice because the depth of the conversation got broader.
Nice.
Because someone would say something, oh yeah, that I hadn't thought about it like that. And then it led to something else, which led to something else. So yeah, that was really nice. And it was really enjoyable to watch the conversation grow.
Yeah. Nice. Perfect. That's for me, that's two of the main points. And there are two things. There's the bouncing off each other and the broadening, and then the joy of that. There's something really joyful about sharing and bouncing and being together. There's a way of being together in a really positive relationship. And that just, it's like an upward spiral. It contributes to the learning, and then we bounce more and learn more. And yeah, it's great. Thank you.
In sharing stories, the same thing may be illustrated, but with different stories from different people, which enriches the storyboard, as it were.
Yes. Yes. And we have mirror neurons, which as we listen to somebody else's story, our mirror neurons, in a way, put ourselves in their stories, if that makes sense. So if you hear 3 different examples of how something happens, there's part of you that takes it on and feels that it's your own.
Yeah, you can understand it a little more, can't you, if you've heard it several times before?
Yes, and understand it in different ways. Yeah, great. Thanks, Roger. Who else? Who else would share with us? See a note from Jeanette. Good to see you, Jeanette. We'll see you next time. And she was saying, interesting to share stories about how knowing about our brain helps.
I think I will add to what Claire was saying, because what I enjoyed the most was the broadening.
Okay.
Something I did not think about that was brought to me. And first of all, it makes you really long for conversations like this, where you talk to another human being who is just like right there with you, and on the same wavelength, and kind of curious with you. And when you talk about joy, that's a real shot of joy right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. It's a sense of belonging. We're in it together. The brain loves that. Gives us a nice set of dopamine to say yes. And then that helps our learning. I just love how it just keeps building on. The joy builds on the capacity to learn, increases the conversation, builds more learning. There's lots of reasons to have social learning. What else? What else in those conversations helped you learn something?
I think I made a statement that the emotions overtook whatever one actually knew about the brain. So one wasn't necessarily in charge of one's behavior just because one knew about the brain because the emotions were stronger.
And so on the topic of how emotions, going back to the topics, on the emotional brain drives most of our choices, that topic you guys were talking about, yeah. And how did learning, as you talked about that and emotions took over, how did that help you, as you discussed it, how did that help you learn more about it? If that makes sense. And so, Olivia, as you're talking about that, I'm thinking about how things often sort of boomerang on each other. So the thing you're talking about the emotional brain drives most of our choices. The emotional brain might drive how the conversation goes as well. Sometimes what we're talking about, what we're learning about, what we're conversing about can be the thing that happens between us as well. I don't know if that happened for you. But people are talking about joy and how the joy is a big part of the conversation. I don't know if I'm off in la la land in my own fascination with this.
About knowing the individuals.
Rashmi, I can barely hear you.
Sorry. I think there's something about knowing about the individuals who are in the breakout room, even like a short intro, which helps to relate to the learning even more. And Roger took a lead on that, and I kind of found that very helpful in having those mirror neurons, as you call them.
Yeah. Yes, it helps to know who the people are, because for one thing, that helps create safety, which helps us be willing to share more if we feel safe. The brain is also more open to learning when we feel safe. If we're feeling nervous, like who is this person and what do I know about them and what do they know about me? If we're nervous at all, even at a very small level, it can prohibit some of our learning capacity. So knowing about them creates safety, but it's also something to build on. I think that's more of what you meant, Rashmi. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw this in our group with Olivia, and she kind of opened up and started with a really nice metaphor for emotions, and kind of brought us a little bit closer together versus like three like strangers starting a conversation. So, but it was really nice. It was a little dance, and it kind of came together, and we all laughed about it and had smiles on our face. So by opening up also is like one after another, kind of brought us a little bit closer together and get to know each other. And also we brought things in that we currently working with where this relates to. So it was really nice to see that in such a short time, and then 10 minutes went really fast, I felt.
Yeah. Yes, we'll be doing another fast 10-minute conversation in a little bit. They do go fast because we're enjoying ourselves, right? I want to name the thing. I think we've said these already. I just wanted to make sure these points are covered about why social learning helps us learn. And I'll just list them, just talk about them each briefly. I think you mentioned them all in different ways. So talking helps us conceptualize things. So we talked about how it broadens our understanding and helps, we hear somebody say something and we go, oh, okay. So it broadens our understanding, which is the second part. But it also helps us understand the concept so we can understand the idea more fully. If we only have our own viewpoint on it, we might only understand part of it. But as we have different viewpoints, we get the broader view, fuller ability to conceptualize an idea. And as, so on the second point about listening helps you broaden your understanding and helps people get to know one another. Rashmi, I think that's what you were speaking to. And if people get to know one another, they feel safer. And I was just describing that, and that helps us be more open to learning. Positive interactions keep the brain happy, open, and able to focus. And that, of course, requires some positivity to begin with. So there's some care to be had there. And I'm going to go to tips for in a moment. I'm going to go to tips for how to make sure that you're setting off in the right direction if you are guiding others through a social learning experience. Emotions are contagious. So motivation is also contagious. And if people are excited to learn, there's positivity in the environment, people are choosing to be there, that can be motivating, and the motivation can be contagious. So if you are the opposite of that, let me just speak to that for a moment. If you happen to be running a training program, say in an organization where everyone was forced to come and nobody wants to be there, whatever the environment is will be contagious. So if everybody's grumpy, that will become bigger, and it's the social learning might backfire. If you're putting people in learning groups, might backfire. It might also turn itself around. So if people are able to, in the small learning group, be able to get back on track and find a sense of belonging and create some sense of positivity, some sense of togetherness. Oh, we're in this together. We all don't want to be here together. Let's see what we can learn. That's possible too, but it will help to have some influence on them. Like, what will they need in order to be happy learning groups together? So as whatever the mood is will be exaggerated because emotions are contagious.
Lori,
yes.
Can you
Rona.
speak a little bit more about if a group
Sorry, I couldn't hear that.
Coming because they're forced to, and everybody is grumpy, to use your word. If you're when you have a group where everybody is forced to be there, it's required perhaps by the company, and everybody's grumpy. What can you as the leader do to help maybe change that environment?
The first thing that comes to mind is to have people be at choice. How do you, because if they're forced to learn, that's a threat to their autonomy, their emotional brains will be in rebellion. And so you need to get people bought in to the learning process. If there's no buy-in, it will likely tank, but you can do that. So as a leader, as a facilitator, you can ask people what they need. When I do sessions like that with organizations, if I believe that there's going to be a lot of people who are grumpy, if I'm running a program that people have been forced to come to, I will ask if, how would I put this? If we can invite people, it's not just invite people to leave, but to say, you have a choice to be here or not. So what do you choose? And I'm not asking you to leave, of course not, but it's a choice of whether you're here or not. There's got to be, because it's really hard to create learning with people who just don't want to. So you might ask them what they need. You might give them the choice, and given the choice, they might say, okay, I know I have to be here, so I'll stay. And then they might say what they need. Rona, does that help, or does that feel like?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So,
thank you.
Yeah, sure. So practice is on this list because that's what really helps us learn, is to do things over and over, the behaviors over and over and over again. And another aspect of social learning is that when we get motivated, we are more with each other. We're more motivated to practice whatever it is we're trying to learn. Social learning also helps people keep accountable to one another. So I'm in a social learning group. We all decide that we're going to take some action. We're going to practice this thing that we're learning out there in the world. Because we've said it together, we are more to each other. We're more likely to go to do this thing, especially if we have a way to check in with one another. Some of the programs that I run, people have WhatsApp groups for their learning groups, and they check in with one another. How did you do? How did you do? That keeps people accountable moving forward. And it's way more powerful than someone just committing and swearing that they're going to do this thing all on their own, because our peer pressure works. And so if you can create some positive peer pressure situations, that's going to help them be engaged in their learning process. Here are some tips. If you're setting up a learning group, as Rashmi was saying earlier, and I think as Olivia was doing in the group that she went to, is helping people get to know one another and feel safe together. That's why we do breakout sessions. Arona, back to your question, if people are grumpy, we might just, you can just say, who's grumpy here? Who doesn't want to be here? Who feels like you're in rebellion mode, and help them get out of that mood and into something else. Acknowledging it sometimes helps, helping people understand who else is in that mood and mode. And it might be part of creating safety at the very beginning. Positivity, whatever you can do, happy brains learn better. I've been saying this in a number of different ways. If you can have some fun activities that people are willing to engage in. Now, if you try to do too much fun, dancing, bouncing around with people who really don't want to, that might have another boomerang effect, a backfiring effect. But if, what is it how can you stretch their level of fun just a little bit where you know that they'll buy in and have fun and be positive and happy together? That can help people. One of the programs I run, we play lots of games, and the games aren't the learning experience, but there's learning that happens alongside the games. Why not use a game in order to see how a team works together, as opposed to sitting around a boardroom table and having a conversation? If it doesn't matter, take the fun option. Here's how we are when we play together. Here's how we are when we get together and work together. And then have guided conversations. So what we put you in, this social learning that we put you in a few minutes ago, there were a couple of questions, pick a topic, have some, we started you off with a couple of questions. And so that's important. Here's the conversation to have. I've had many, talk about backfiring. I've had many experiences where we put people into groups and I didn't do a good job of guiding the experience. And then people will chat and they go, just have a chit chat and get to know one another, which is really nice, in an organization where you have learning groups. They like to get to know one another, but they can also get to know one another through the work. So have a guide. I actually provide guides. Here's an hour guide for how you work through this. And if they don't do it, that's fine. At least they're doing something together rather than just having a chit chat. They might want to create their own, which is absolutely fine. Any other thoughts about tips for creating an environment that feels safe and positive and happy, and one where people will want to talk together and learn together? Any other tips? Colleen.
Have some food.
Oh, food. That's good. Yes. Especially in those in-person situations.
Yes. Of
Yes.
course, that was pre-pandemic.
Yeah, so pre-pandemic and soon to be perhaps post-pandemic, we'll see. Have some food, even invite people to bring their own if you're in a virtual setting, having breaks, having whatever you can do for brain care, inviting people to turn their videos off if you're on a virtual setting so that the eye strain is lower. Anything for well-being is helpful. So even food and healthy food.
Good question.
And a bit of coffee. Shinsen.
Yes, I have a question regarding movement. And what is your experience and how that really impacts our brain when we have some sort of a, focus movement or mindfulness movement before a meeting?
Oh, before a meeting. Yes. Well, any mindfulness you can do, or movement, playing music, having people move a little to the music, or even dance, or any of that gets us out of our emotional brain, can get us unstuck from unfriendly feelings and thoughts, and have us tap more into our ability to manage ourselves and to have a foundation, so then we can build a positive mindset from there. So absolutely. As long as it's not freaking people out and they're thinking, I have had groups go, oh, this movement stuff, this is too weird for me. And then they're all sulking, and that's not helpful. So stretching them a little, freaking them out is probably not, the best thing. However, you might freak out a couple of people, but if everyone else goes for it, they might come along. It's kind of knowing your audience. All right, I see that it's 4:40. I want to have you in another conversation, especially as I lose my voice here. You'll be in a breakout room again. And let's make this for 7 minutes, so it's short. And given what you've heard today, the earlier experience that you had learning together, have a think about how can you get people to learn together? How will you create a positive atmosphere for the type of clients and situations that you have, whether they're virtual or in person? How will you create a positive atmosphere? That might start with an icebreaker, or it might be, some people like poetry, or like Shinsen was saying, there might be music or movement or something like that. how do you create that positive atmosphere that then builds more positivity and that joy of learning together? So off you go to a room. Again, you'll have 3 people. We're mixing it up, so you'll likely be in different rooms than you were earlier. And you have about 7 minutes. So we have 7 minutes. Cooksoul, you and I, we have 7 minutes with the YouTube gang and our recording. So if I have enough voice here, I will continue to talk about how people learn together. So here's our questions. How can you get people to learn together? And how will you create a positive atmosphere? I want to start with a positive atmosphere. Some of the ways that I've done that, I often create agreements with people. How do we want to be together in this training, in this learning, in this team coaching? And sometimes I'll make suggestions for, confidentiality to help make it feel safe. No question is a stupid question, those kind of things. Please ask, let's have conversations. Let me know when something doesn't make sense. I can go off into these philosophical things in my own head. So if I'm doing that, let me know. There can be things like that in agreements. And agreements generally will create safety, which then can lead to positivity. And that safety is really essential for any kind of learning. So agreements are one thing. And Shinsen had suggested music, and that got me thinking also, having music that people can relate to or they can move to, especially in in-person settings, but why not in a virtual space as well? You could take a 5-minute music break. Everybody turn their videos off and have a moment of reflection with music, or maybe it's a moment of reflection without music. But those moments of reflection and breaks and coffee or snacks or whatever people do on their breaks can be really helpful for creating and maintaining a positive space. Speaking of breaks, if you have a group for a period of time, let's say 3 hours, and you have a break in the middle, at least want to have a 15-minute break. If you have people for a half an hour or for 3 hours, ask them not to be on their devices. Because as people go on a break, they've been focusing on this learning environment, and then they go off and they have a break and they're on doing emails, and sometimes they have to, but if they can do it without and actually have a break, that is going to help them sustain their positivity and their focus and their ability to learn. So that's one of the agreements I like to make also, is when we have breaks, let's stay off our devices. And if you have day-long programs, I know it's really hard for people these days to stay off their devices over a lunch break, but let's say you were doing a leadership program that was somewhat immersive and you have a full day with them. That's likely to be an in-person. I don't think many people do full day virtual sessions, but let's say you have an immersive leadership program. You want people to stay in that space because it can be so invaded by irritating emails and irritating messages and people finding out this, and then if these are people who work together and they've all checked their email and they saw this announcement, it can create gossip and things that they can't handle because they're in this program. So I know it might get even bigger if they don't have the chance to deal with it over their lunch break and they have to deal with it in the evening. Yet, if you can have agreements with people about staying off devices, it will help maintain your culture, the culture you want in your learning environment. What else can you do to create positive atmosphere? Again, having people work together regularly through a program, making sure that they are tending to their working relationships also. So if they have a small learning group, having them create small agreements and making sure, when people get together, we also irritate one another. That's just humanity as well. And giving them tools to make sure that doesn't happen or helping them through those times if they do happen. so that we clean out any negativity that starts seeping in or give a chance to have an outlet for it. And then we can maintain the positivity. So getting people to learn together, I'm going to say this when we come back, but I want to emphasize having a learning path, a set of things that we have people talk about. So when I send them off to these groups, they have 2 questions. These 2 questions to discuss. Earlier in that social learning, we had 2 topics. I mean, it's easy enough for me to, I've made the mistake many times to say, oh, go learn something together, and I have in mind what that means. I have in my mind what that means, but it isn't the same what's in their mind. So be structured about it. It's fine if they break the structure. If they have a better structure, that's fine. But for the people who don't know what you mean, they need something from you to have a guide. So when we do learning groups, and in this case, when I'm talking about learning groups, it's learning groups between multiple sessions. So I have, we run virtual sessions. So there's chapters every week, and there would be week 1, do this and have a learning group. And that learning group has a learning group guide for their conversation, which is about this chapter, chapter 1. And then the next week, there's a learning guide about chapter 2. And another week is a learning guide about chapter 3, and so on. Or you have in-person sessions, and then you have social learning opportunities. So small groups or buddy pairs who are learning together, learning to implement what you taught them in the in-person session. Have a guide for that conversation, because people do get lost, and it helps them. It gives them structure, it gives them certainty. This is what we're supposed to be doing. And that can just help them settle in and feel less uncertain, helps them feel certain and create stability for what they're supposed to do. Otherwise they can go, well, I don't know what we're supposed to do. How are you? How are you? What are you doing? And it can turn into a gossip session. And I go, this isn't working. Let's, hang up. So yeah, a guide is really helpful. I think we have about a minute before people come back. And I notice I'm just talking to a screen, and there's no social learning happening here. And I find it very isolating feeling and a bit foreign, because I really like interactions with people, because I really trust this social learning. Looks like people are coming back to the plenary session. So to all of you, any of you who are observing this or watching this on the recording or live on YouTube, I hope it's useful. It's not the same as a social learning situation where you actually are getting to talk as well. And here we have people coming back. Hi there, was this a learning group that you guys were together, Claire, Olivia, and Rashmi?
I do like that you let us come back rather than grab us back.
Good. I do that very intentionally, because people don't like that whiplash effect. But there still is a countdown clock, and if they don't come back on their own accord.
You have chosen not to drag us back, then. I noticed that. Yes, we're returning voluntarily, aren't we?
It feels better, doesn't it?
I think it does, really, yes.
But there is a clock ticking, so
I think you guys need to ask the people that are in room number 3 what they say about this, because they did not come back, and they were whoop right now.
Oh, they're still there, are they?
So the last group that came back, you were just forced to come back. Is that right? You were cut off.
Yeah.
Apologies for that. We were just having this discussion because I don't know if you saw the notice that says, please come back. So we say, please come back. This is really intentional. Say, please come back, so people can come back on their own accord. They feel like they're in charge of their destiny. And there were some people who came back and were really noticing that and appreciating that. And if you don't come back on your own accord, you're forced back after a minute. And what's it feel like to be forced back?
Not a problem. We squeezed every second we could.
Although, funnily enough, you see, Jacqueline and I were talking about, in our group of 2, a number of factors that create a positive atmosphere. And one was that we had both decided to join this seminar on neuroscience, voluntarily, as it were. We'd chosen it. So it suggested that we were looking for similar things.
Yes.
And so immediately that created positivity.
Yes. Having things in common. Yeah.
Yeah. We'd not been dragged here, which was the link with dragging people back to the main room. Yeah.
Right, right, right. We like to be a choice. The brain likes autonomy.
Yes.
But it also feels like a big responsibility, having the choice to come back and be back in time to fulfill the social contract to the rest of the group does feel like a responsibility as well.
And okay. Yeah, so are you responsible to the small group and getting the last little bits out of that group, or coming responsibility to the large group?
I think it's the broader responsibility.
But it does create divided loyalties, though. I think Rashmi's right. You know, you think you could carry on talking here, but we have to get back. So yeah, but choice brings responsibility, of course. It's the existential proposition, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a wonderful conversation. And then if you don't choose to come back, then you will be forced. Your choice will be made for you.
I wonder what would happen if you just left people in their breakout room forever and see what happens then.
Yeah, good question. When I first, so 6-8 months ago, when lockdown started and I started doing more virtual sessions instead of in-person sessions, I was loving this idea that you can force people back, until I got such pushback from people going, you know, that's not nice to be forced. But it reminded me that in-person groups, you know, you have several small groups in a room, you say, please come back, please come back, please come back, because people are really engaged. You know, that social learning is so strong that people stay in there. So I think there's a balance. Balance. Any top tips about creating positivity and environments where people will learn well together? Sorry about that.
We thought, Jacqueline and I thought trust was important too. And although, well, Jacqueline, I shouldn't speak for you, of course, but although trust takes longer to build, there was an absence of distrust.
Nice.
We had no reason to distrust each other because we had both arrived here by choice. Whereas I guess in a work environment where there's a legacy of office politics and history and so on and jostling, you may start from a different place of having some element of distrust, whereas Jacqueline and I had no distrust.
That's great.
So it was in that sense positive. So we talked about the role of trust.
Yeah, beautiful. Yes, and the more you work together, if you were co-creating well together, that trust would build, I believe.
Yeah. But it's probably important to being positive, isn't it?
Yes, because I think distrust is part of destroying positivity.
Yeah.
Right. Well, we have about 6 minutes left, and I just want to wrap up. I'm not going to do a whole long thing about a program that we're offering. What I do want to talk about is, in a program that we're offering, how do we use social learning? So it's kind of a wrap up of how we do. So you'll learn a little bit about this Rewired to Lead program, but even more how social learning shows up in those programs. So we run online programs, both if you come to a previous webinar, you heard about Rewired to Relate, which is a 5-week program. Rewired to Lead is just a longer 10-month version, not a version of that, but it builds on this Rewired to Relate. And it is a leadership program, and there's all kinds of aspects of leadership that are involved and taught and experienced in that. What we do is online learning. So everything is online. We've got videos and quizzes and all kinds of online learning. It's very individualistic, and we know that people don't learn that way. They don't, it's a starting point. We have put a ton of effort into creating it in a way that is engaging, but we know that it's passive absorption when you have an online program. So how do you create engagement for that? And that's where we try to do everything we can to create a social learning aspect of it. So there is, we create learning groups together. We have webinars that start, okay, everybody, here's our starting place, get to know everybody who's in the program, who else is on this journey with you. Then you're in a learning group, much like we do breakout rooms here. People get to know one another. this is your learning group for the next 5 weeks for this whole module. And you will be meeting weekly, hopefully. And that's where the work comes alive. Somebody told me today, you're on this call. Thank you for that. That's where the work comes alive, is in the conversations. And that's a great thing. When I first, some of you might have heard me say this before, when I first encountered that, I had a program and we had learning groups or learning buddies, and people would come back and they go, the best part of the program was when I was talking to my colleagues. And, my first selfish reaction is, oh, right, they didn't like my program. It isn't about that. It's that's where they were getting the juice and the engagement. All my job is to create some opportunities for that. So here's some stuff to learn and go practice, knowing that it's going to come to life when they talk about it with other people. And so now when we bring this to companies, we do everything we can, knowing that everybody is really busy, saying, please hold accountability. The learning and development people, please hold accountability as you roll this program out. Encourage people to do the learning groups, because that's where the program comes alive for them. That's actually what creates accountability in the end. The learning groups work together and they have a learning guide. We provide learning guides for them. And the learning guides are about what you did in the previous week, in the previous chapter, in these topics, what happened for you. And then they have conversations about that, much like you've had conversations today. So it has them be accountable to one another. It has them stay on point with the program that's online, but there's the social element that keeps them honest, that keeps them on it and keeps them honest. Huge part, because that's what brings the program to life. And it's not, it's not an insult to our learning, our online learning. Online learning is just a spark. So please, if you're doing any kind of learning in this virtual environment, it's hard for people to be in this kind of setting. They much prefer small groups, have breakout groups, have learning groups where they meet in between, whether it's phone calls of their own, virtual, Zoom or whatever, groups of 3 to 4 where they can have really good conversations, really, really helpful, and it'll have them like your program better. And they'll still claim that it was meeting with their colleagues that did it, which is great. And so what are you going to say?
Just a short stepping in. Arona has been raising her hand and wants to say something. So
Arona, I'm sorry. I see it. Apologies. Arona.
No, that's fine. I was going to say in response to your question, in the last breakout group, Magda, one of the things that she mentioned is to ask a group of people, what do you need? How can we make this nicer and more useful for you? And while that was something to say in response to knowing that people are being forced to be there, it actually could be used anytime. It doesn't have to be only because people are being forced to be there. And somebody mentioned earlier that food is very helpful in making things positive. And on another training that I was on, somebody mentioned that a company, what the people did is send a meal to each person who was going to be on the Zoom meeting.
Oh, how nice.
Wow.
Wow, I love that. So that it arrived on their doorstep about the time that this session was starting.
Right.
Logistically, very impressive.
Yes, logistically.
Very impressive.
Everybody wait. Next webinar, just wait for the doorbell to ring before we start.
How does that happen? And everybody politely doesn't answer the door and just finds a plate of cold food on their doorstep at the end of the webinar.
Oh, that's great. Well, I see that it is top of the hour. Any final thoughts from anyone? Thoughts or questions?
It's been good, thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks everyone for coming and participating in a little social learning and for contributing, asking great questions and having great observations. We'll see you next time.
Look forward to it.
Thank you, Laurie. It was great.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thanks, Laurie.
Bye. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Laurie. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Laurie.
Welcome. Thanks. Bye. See you next time.
Thank you, Laurie. Bye.
Thank you. It's really wonderful.
Well, thanks.